Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofermento, and we are joined by an incredible entrepreneur today. She's actually a serial entrepreneur. It's so clear to me and all the stuff that I've looked into before we got together for today's episode. This guest, once she got bit by the entrepreneurial bug, she could not help herself, not only when it comes to starting her own businesses, but most importantly, she loves helping other small businesses grow. So let me introduce you to today's guest. Her name is Aubrey Merritt. Aubrey is the founder of Merritt Innovative Consulting and Advisory, and through her company, she provides financial, strategic, and operational managed services to scaling small to mid-market businesses, including project management, fractional COO services, fractional CFO services. You're going to hear how much she loves the financial aspect of businesses, as well as bookkeeping, advisory, and tax planning. They have experience in various industries such as law firms, home service-based businesses such as plumbers, electricians, and HVAC technicians, as well as real estate, property management companies, and heck, you're going to see just how much Aubrey loves businesses of all shapes and sizes. So if you're looking to grow and sometimes you shy away from the operational and the financial side of your business, then you're in for a treat today. We're all going to learn a lot, so I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview with Aubrey Merritt. All right, Aubrey, I am so very excited that you're here with us today. First things first, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. That was a great introduction.
My pleasure. Aubrey, I always know when I'm in the presence of somebody else who just loves business and loves talking about business, so we're going to pack a lot in. But first things first, take us beyond the bio. Who's Aubrey? How'd you start doing all these cool things?
So my name's Aubrey, as you just mentioned, but I got into this business in a different way. So originally in high school, I started on the business track and started taking personal finance classes, different things like that. And then I got pregnant at 17 years old and had a daughter. I had a full ride scholarship to go to college, and that ended up being put on the back burner. And I ended up getting married really young and to a military soldier, and we moved to Washington State, where I started working for the government, and I got an opportunity to work as an administrative assistant. So as the administrative assistant, I worked directly with the basically base commander for a company called the Army and Air Force Exchange Service. And let me tell you, when you are working for the government, they kind of throw you into a lot of different things. So I learned a little bit of accounting, learned a little bit of operation, human resource, just various different things. And I found out that I really, really love it. So from that point, I decided that I wanted to go to college for business. And when I took my first accounting class, I fell in love and I blew up my life. So I ended up leaving the Army and Air Force Exchange Service after working there for about 6 years. And right around that time, I also became a single mother, and which was very scary for me. Going from making, a decent living to $10 an hour as an intern and trying to pay for college was very scary and very difficult. But I decided to take the risk because I knew I loved accounting so much and I loved the business side and I wanted to improve my life. So once I got my degree, I started working as bookkeeper, as a tax accountant, and I started to notice with small businesses that they had a lot of the same nuances. So that's where I kind of decided to go into consulting, and I've been there ever since, and I absolutely love it. I love helping small businesses scale, and I just love anything in general when it comes to the finance or when it comes to building businesses.
Yeah, I really appreciate that about your backstory, Aubrey, because I feel like it shows through in all of your chapters how much you love all of these. I'm going to call them departments because we're most familiar of departments in different corporate environments. But within our own businesses, of course, we are all of the departments. We have to be the accounting department. We have to be the HR department. We have to be the strategic side of the business. We have to handle operations, all of these different things. And it just seems to me like you love wearing all of those hats, each and every every one of them, you understand that they're part of our business's growth fuel. Talk to us about that big word. I feel like it's thrown around a lot in business podcasts of scale. Everybody wants to scale their business, but of course it takes different things to make that scale happen. From your perspective, working with as many small businesses as you have, what's it take to scale a business? Why do some businesses not scale and some do?
Okay, so there's two scenarios that happen. You have the scenario where there was this trigger in the business that made them scale overnight or over a short period of time and they weren't expecting it. And then you have a scenario where it was very intentional. So when it comes to it, both have their nuances or their issues. So generally the people that we work with, when it's the overnight success or the short-term success, that's where they don't have processes in place and they really need assistance with maintaining the capacity that they currently have. And the other scenario where they need to scale, a lot of it takes intentional planning. So you have to have the right people in the right places for the right price. And unfortunately, a lot of small businesses, when they are starting out, they don't have those three things in the people that they find. So they really have to be willing to adjust because they will fail various times, especially with the people that they pick or the decisions they make. But they have to be willing to adjust at a moment's notice, be able to look back and look at what the decisions they made and look how the outcomes were and truly decide, do we continue moving in this direction or do we switch gears? Being able to pivot is extremely important in the scale process.
Yeah, when I hear you talk about that, Aubrey, anytime we tune into a business podcast, it seems obvious. It's just like, well, yeah, if things aren't working, of course we need to pivot. We need to be fully intentional and strategic about the moves that we make. I would imagine that in your role, though, it's easier for you to see these things than it is for the business owners because they're in it. They live it every single day, probably for years up to that point before you get to work with them. What is it when you walk in that, first of all, you look at? What are those questions that you're asking yourself about that business that you're working with? And then secondly, what do you often spot that the business owner themselves doesn't see?
So one thing, I was just having this conversation with someone earlier today. So when you start a business, a lot of business owners, what they'll do is they will hire in a particular way, or they will set up a process in a particular way that is the most cost efficient. So sometimes that means that they'll be doing the bookkeeping, they'll be doing the marketing, they'll be doing the operations. And at the end of the day, what they do best might be plumbing or it might be being a lawyer. But when you're grassroots, you have to do those things. And a lot of times what they'll get very comfortable with those processes because it always worked before. They'll get very comfortable with the people that they've hired because of the fact that they were there from the beginning. And one thing that I try to do when I'm coming into a situation with the new business owners is I do something called a diagnostic. So whether it's an operational diagnostic or it's a financial diagnostic, and what I try to identify is any inefficiencies or places that they could improve or grow. And then I support it with data. So I might do screenshots of particular processes that they currently have, or I'll identify certain shortfalls. I'll also ask, key stakeholders in the facility, what are your pain points? And I kind of put all of that together into a big picture view. And I give recommendations. So based off of those recommendations, they'll get step-by-step instructions on how they can implement it themselves, or we could work together to implement it. A lot of times business owners will want to do kind of a hybrid scenario where they do some of it and then we work in partnership with them. But really when it comes to changing people's minds, especially business owners, because they're smart individuals, they made it this far. They took the risk. They had the courage to open up a business, which, believe me, it takes a lot of courage and a lot of confidence. So they do all of that. You have to respect that when you're coming into that situation. And you have to also allow them to be a part of the process in deciding where they want to go. And So if you take all of that into consideration and come up with a plan that is specific to their pain points and also industry standards, I think you're going to have a lot more opportunity for them to want to buy into what you're saying.
Yeah, I can definitely see that, especially back in 2012. My second business that I ever started was a marketing agency, and I was in my early 20s and I was in Boston. And Aubrey, quite honestly, I was convinced that the answer to all business problems was just more marketing, which led to more revenue. And I worked with so many local businesses, restaurants, plumbers, lawyers, so many different types of companies. And that was really what I helped them to do, was to amass more revenue and build their business that way. But you bring it back to those fundamental elements of your operations have to be intact. And then what I really appreciate, and in my early 20s, I certainly didn't get this, and a lot of my clients weren't set up for success this way, is that you have to understand how to make those finances work for you. I feel like those are two often underlooked things. And still to this day, as the host of this podcast, I know how many listeners just want to hear about marketing, which is why we bring amazing experts like you and Aubrey to really focus on the business fundamentals that make the rest of the things work. Talk to us about that financial side of the equation, because it's not as simple as just the revenue. You love accounting and finance in so many different ways. What do you look at when you talk about finances within a business?
Right. So most of the time when I'm dealing with scaling companies, their finances aren't set up accurately to be able to give them real-time data to make decisions. So generally what I do is I first get that set up correctly. Your financial statements are extremely important and it also helps you identify where you might have some downfalls. So for example, the gross revenue, which you talk about, a lot of people get excited about that, but you also have cost of goods sold. You also have operating costs. You also have other expenses. And based on how you organize your financial statement, that will determine where you might be having issues. So for example, if you have a cost of goods or cost of sales or cost of goods sold section, cost of sales is usually for service-based businesses, and cost of goods sold is usually for inventory or product-based goods businesses. So generally what you want to do when you're looking at your financial statement is the cost of sales or cost of goods sold. You want to have all your expenses that are directly related to generating your revenue in that section, which will bring you to gross profit. When in a small company, what you'll find, especially those ones that are just kind of starting out and scaling, is that if you have it organized correctly, sometimes they have a negative gross profit. And what that means is you're never going to make money with your current strategy, the current way that you're servicing your product or servicing your goods. Now, when you get to sometimes that is positive, which is great. Now you move down to the operating expenses. This is like overhead costs, things you have to spend in order to do business, but aren't necessarily related to your direct revenue. Those are a little bit more controllable, especially when it comes to personnel costs, or if it comes to leasing versus buying, all of those things. That's an area that is a lot more controllable when it comes to servicing your product. And then you have the other expense area. This is usually for items that are not so common. It might be, for example, your depreciation cost. If you buy a computer, it depreciates over time. Usually in a certain amount of time, maybe 3 years. So what a depreciation cost is essentially it's saying you're using this much of that computer over the 3 years instead of expensing it all together. Interest expense might be there. So if you have a lot of loans that are helping you fund your business, all of your interest expense will land there. So if you are at a positive net income or net operating income number, but then you go negative right there, that might mean like, hey, I might need to refinance these loans or find different ways to fund my company. Other different things that you can do. If you have good financials, you have a good accounting system set up, you can do job costing or project costing. So for example, let's say that you wanted to start a new product line. If you start a new product line, or let's say you invent a new item, so research and development, you can actually class these items through job costing or project management costing to see on an individual product basis how well that product is performing. A lot of newer business owners or newer entrepreneurs, they make decisions based off of feeling instead of data. So if you have your accounting system set up correctly and you have your bookkeeping set up correctly and you're tracking all the specific data that you want to make decisions on, you can actually make decisions based on data instead of feeling.
Aubrey, hearing the way you talk about this, it's very clear to me that you view this data as something that is actionable and certainly something that is strategic, whereas I feel like a lot of listeners are going to be tuning in saying, Aubrey, I'll worry about this stuff come tax season. You know, so many people want to ignore this stuff. What does that workflow look like? If people are hearing you talk about this and they want to step into more actionable and strategic decision making from their numbers, is this something that your clients meet with you weekly on, monthly, quarterly? How should we effectively keep our eye on the ball when you know full well we're also focusing on running our businesses, of course?
Absolutely. So in this day and age, there's a lot of tools out there. There's a lot of automation out there. So if you are, let's say making 500,000 or less a year, I think that there are actionable plans that maybe you work with a specialist such as us, where we come in, we set up these systems for you. We make sure that you have the correct reports that will auto generate. We make sure we have the correct categorization set up. And you only meet with us maybe on a quarterly or annual basis, but you need to do that work up front to make sure that you have the systems in place to make those proactive decisions based on how you're spending or the reports that you create. Now, if you're making 500,000 more a year, maybe it would be more important for us to meet with you on a monthly basis. And then if you're making over $1 million, maybe twice a month to weekly. If you're making over 5 million, probably more often than that. But I believe that it is very important at least to get a consultation or to get the system set up from the very beginning to actually invest in yourself when it comes to the financials. So that way, in 3 years or in 2 years, or let's say you become that overnight success or that short-term success, you already have scalable, actionable items in place instead of trying to be reactive on your compliance, or for example, tax is compliance, being reactive on tax, having that surprising tax bill. If you work with a consultant like us or you work with an accountant like us, what we'll do is make sure that you have all those systems and processes in place in advance and teach you in a way to where you can do it yourself with our setup being correct. So that way it's more affordable and you're not trying to chase compliance later on. A lot of our businesses that we work with, it's usually around the 3 to 5 year mark. They've just hit $1 million and they're deciding, hey, I used to have my wife or my niece or my uncle doing my books or, maintaining our operations. And now we just got an audit request, or now we owe $300,000 to the IRS. We need help. Usually at that point in time, there are things that we can do to assist you to get out of that mess, but it would be a lot simpler and a lot easier if you were able to work with us start up front and getting these systems in place and knowing all the responsibilities that you do have as an entrepreneur and a new business owner.
Yeah, I think it's especially important that you and I are having this conversation here in Q4 because everybody waits until tax time. Obviously, so many people, myself included, were guilty of that from time to time. But having this conversation now and you talking about working with a bookkeeper, I think probably everybody's worked with a tax person at some point, but maybe a lot of newer business owners especially haven't worked with a bookkeeping service. And they probably wonder, Aubrey, what does that look like? Do you get access to my bank account statements? Do you get access to my credit card statements? Do I have to text you pictures of my receipts when I buy anything? Like, what does it actually look like to have someone manage your books? So that, I think that's really cool because especially for a new business owner, they could probably generate their financials weekly. They could probably have really in-depth views into their finances with somebody else actually handling it for them. So what does that actually look like?
So you had mentioned something about taxes that just reminded me that I definitely want to mention to everyone. So there is a difference between a bookkeeper and a tax accountant. So when you have and a controller and a CFO, but let's talk about a financial bookkeeping or accountant person, and let's discuss a tax accountant. So tax accountants, essentially what they're doing is they're preparing your tax return after something happens. So they're looking at that point, you've already had an entire year of expenses. You've already had an entire strategy in place, or lack of strategy or strategy in place. And they're just preparing information in a way for the IRS to understand. You really have to be proactive about your numbers in order to reduce your tax liability, in order to make sure that your financials are correct. Because again, when it comes to financials, financial accounting is different than tax accounting. So you have tax basis and you have financial basis. A lot of lenders would prefer to see financial basis, because tax basis, they try to expense as much as possible in order to reduce your tax liability, while financial basis tries to increase your income as much as possible so you look good for creditors and investors. So let me just make a lot of small businesses, they make the mistake of hiring their tax accountant and saying, oh, my tax accountant would have told me if I was doing something wrong, or my tax accountant would have told me a way to save money. And that's not always the case. That's why you do need that proactive person kind of in place. Now, when working with a bookkeeper, it really just depends, a bookkeeper or an accountant or a consultant, it really just depends what type of engagement you want to work with them on. So for example, I have a business flight plan that we offer to kind of those solopreneurs. And what we do is we'll give them a tax plan based on their current numbers, and we will give them quarterly bookkeeping services. We'd give them a system where they essentially give us read-only access to their bank accounts or any vendors that they don't want to pull receipts for. And we go in and we'll pull that information for them. Anything that they don't want to pull themselves, what they will give them a phone number or an email or some sort of alias that they can turn everything in, just so that way the bookkeeper can categorize things correctly. Now, they don't always have to have a receipt to categorize things correctly, but generally having the receipt will help with if we are doing job costing, if we are doing categorization between, let's say, is it a travel cost or is it a business expense? So, or for meals, for example. Is it a travel meal or is it a business meal? Us having that receipt will give us a location to really identify that. So having the receipts help. The other thing that you need to consider as a business, you are not allowed to expense anything that is over 75 without a receipt. That is an IRS rule, and a lot of business owners don't know that. So working with a bookkeeper, they could also help with that receipt management. Now, we have some clients that need a lot more assistance. So, for example, we plug into some of our businesses where we have weekly meetings and we go over their cash flow analysis or their budget and tell them whether they're in budget or not. We talk about whether they're beating KPIs or matrix that they kind of set up in the beginning that is important to them in their business. We have an accountant that actually goes over their financials at the end of the month, does all the category. We have a bookkeeper, controller, CFO. They might get full service. Those are for the bigger clients. However, there are bookkeepers and accountants out there that go through all the ranges. Biggest thing here is that if you're going to do it yourself, have someone at least set the system up for you.
Yeah, so well said. Aubrey, you have done such an amazing job at painting the landscape of all the different considerations and why this stuff matters. And I really appreciate you spelling out the difference between a tax accountant and just what you and I mostly are talking about today, which is an accountant, a bookkeeper, someone who is an advisor and consultant who can fulfill that role throughout the year to set us up, not only set us up in success with regards to our tax burden, but most importantly, set us up for real business growth. Remember, if those big tax bills that we have, those are the result of a lot of the growth that we're having. And so it's important to not just try to decrease your tax burden, but actually increase your business and the size of your business. So I really appreciate that. I want to ask you about technology, because as an end consumer, as someone who's not in your space, we see so many options out there. Like QuickBooks, obviously, is super aggressive in their marketing towards small business owners. I would imagine there's a lot of cool AI technology and software out there these days. What's your take on how much we should pay attention to that? Are there certain systems that set us up for success? Is that something that someone like yourself walks in and helps us to set up? You kind of alluded towards that. How the heck should we be navigating the tech side of these systems?
Right. So it's in our name, innovative. So Merritt Innovative Consulting and Advisory. We are all about innovations. Accountants are kind of moving into more of a role of understanding technology and innovation because a lot of the things that we did before are being taken over by the accounting software and AI. So we're kind of stepping into more of a consulting role when it comes to software. Software is extremely important in this day and age. So you will be working smarter, not harder, by employing the right softwares. I would say that for any small business owner, you need to pick the right tech stack for your company. So for a plumbing company, I might not recommend QuickBooks as their main source of data entry. So you have an accounting software, and then you have a project management software or task management software. So the task management software is usually something that you will use to run your business, to run all the different projects that you have to do, all the different work you have to do. And the accounting software is where you develop the financials. I recommend all business owners to have both. So they should be utilizing a task management software and a accounting software. Now, what I might recommend to a plumber might be different than what I recommend to a law firm. So for a plumber, I might recommend House Call Pro for their needs for the task management and accounting, because they do offer an accounting service there too. So you can send out invoices from this program. You can you can do dispatch work from this program. There's a lot of great services on it. QuickBooks has a lot of those features too, but it is not industry specific for, blue collar type jobs or tradesmen. They do have invoicing capabilities. They do have billing capabilities. They do have receipt capabilities. They have expense capabilities. But at the end of the day, it's not tailored to the actual industry that they're working with. Same thing with law firms. You could have a project management system, or they call it case management, such as Filevine, Clio, MyCase. There's various different ones out there. It really just depends on how that firm works and how they flow, on which one I would recommend. But at the end of the day, again, QuickBooks has a lot of the features that these case management softwares do. However, the case management softwares does it better for their industry than what QuickBooks could do. So I always suggest having both of them and making sure that they integrate together. Now, it doesn't always have to be QuickBooks either. Depending on what size your company is, Xero is a good option. Zoho Books is a good option. I think at the end of the day, we need to identify what are the pain points and where the company wants to go within the next year or two, because also switching accounting softwares can be an expensive feat. So especially when you're brand new, we need to talk about, where do you want to be in the next year or two? How do you want this information to flow? Do you want to be able to do it on your phone? Do you want to be able to do it from any computer? These are all different questions that we would generally ask to identify the best software to go with. And then same thing with, the industry specific tax management software. It depends on the industry and depends on what you're looking for. But at the end of the day, whatever systems you pick, they need to integrate together. So it makes your job easier, stops double entry data, and then you're also meeting your needs for your job and your tasks that you're doing on a daily basis, and your accounting needs.
Yes, that right there, Aubrey, showcases why it often pays to work with an expert such as yourself, because holy cow, there are so many things to navigate in any of these industries, and the fact that you bring that experience, because if someone just Googles it, they're going to find QuickBooks because they've got a big budget. They have great SEO strategy. They're going to get in front of people, but there's so many considerations, and I really appreciate how much you bring, not just the finance and accounting side of it, but of course that operational side as well, and the integration between the two. So I knew time would fly by. We dove into so many topics here, but I want to squeeze in this question that I ask at the end of every episode. It's super broad, and I'm very excited to see what direction you take it in, because you could probably go in 50 different directions with it. But that is, what's your best piece of advice for listeners? Knowing that we're being listened to by both entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs at all different stages of their own growth journeys, and as a fellow entrepreneur yourself, what's that one thing you want to leave them with today?
You need to persevere. You are going to fail so many times, and you cannot compare yourself to other entrepreneurs, because what you are seeing when you're looking at other entrepreneurs is how they succeeded. You're not seeing all the times that they failed. So and I know this isn't a word, but everything is figure outable. You just have to be willing to keep persevering, keep pushing through. Eventually, you're going to figure it out. You will. It might be difficult. You might be short on funds. The product that you put all of your investment and time into, that employee that you put all of your investment and time into might leave. These things are going to happen. But as long as you persevere and you keep telling yourself everything is figure outable, you will figure it out.
Yes, so well said. Holy cow. I love that advice. That's the real stuff. It's super easy for any of us to log on to Instagram, fire up TikTok, listen to a business podcast, and think that everybody else has had such a clear and easy path. But Aubrey, that's the real stuff. Super grateful for you pointing it out for our audience. I'm also very excited for people to check out your website, because if they couldn't already tell from our conversation today, you love this stuff. You love seeing businesses grow, and your website really lays out so beautifully all the different ways that you help your clients. So for listeners who want to find it, drop those links on us. Where should listeners go from here?
So they should go to micainnovations.com, and you can book an appointment from there. You can give us a call. We're accepting clients right now.
All right, and listeners, you already know the drill. We're making it as easy as possible for you to find that link down below in the show notes, no matter where it is that you're tuning into today's episode. We're also linking to Aubrey's personal LinkedIn, so she's super accessible. Honestly, her team on the website, they make it so easy to get in touch with them, but if you want to reach out individually to her, also find the link to her LinkedIn down below in the show notes, no matter where it is that you're tuning in. Otherwise, Aubrey, on behalf of myself and all the listeners worldwide, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you.